Bengaluru, a wonderful city known to many of us. It's well known for its lovely weather, food in pubs, temples, lakes, of course the traffic, the Silicon Valley of India. Oh, no, not that one. This beautiful city has grown many folds in the last few decades, housing about 15 million people, 12 million vehicles, and over 2,000 pubs. Sorry, I digress. The growing population mostly stayed in apartments, making it one of the largest apartment cities in the world, with over 2 million people living in apartments. This growth made the apartment dwellers face several issues with civic bodies, authorities, or even within themselves. A good thing happened is when multiple RWAs got together under an umbrella body called the Bangalore Apartments Federation, or BAF. Today, BAF has emerged as the most important voice for apartment dwellers to fight civic authorities, champion sustainability, and help apartment societies manage in a better way. BAF is run in a professional manner with a governing council led by its president, Vikram Rai,
which was called Bangalore Apartments Federation, because they fundamentally felt that issues like this need the group of people to come together and take it up. The collective strength gives it more sort of credence and credibility to be able to fight it out with the government. The collective demand and the collective pressure and the collective questioning is very powerful. So then BAF then made sense anyway, right? So we are not an NGO, we are not an activism group, we are just a citizen group which is meaning well for the city. Assembly elections, we also replicated it at a constituency level. At least in 4 constituencies, we were able to run local town halls where the candidates of that constituency were invited. And in one of our member apartment complex courtyards. And it makes for a nice
And they all showed up very normally. Everything was not like your 9 o'clock news, right?
It was not a 9 o'clock news. All of them were professional. Every time I used to go out, people used to say that your father had done so many things, this thing, that thing, etc. But you're not involved at all, right? So I was like, okay, let's do something. So then I got involved in that committee. BAF is close to 1,350 members more than that. And that I'm talking about 1,350 RWAs. So between the 1,350 RWAs, they represent almost more than 300,000 households, right? So you're talking about not less than about 1 million, 1.5 million people living there, working there. So it's a huge ecosystem. We do have an app, which is very comprehensive, I would like to believe. So a lot of knowledge, wisdom, which generally somebody who is managing and running affairs of an apartment who needs, most of it is covered in our knowledge base, right? So today, if you have to install a rooftop solar plant, how do you do the waste management? What kind of application you're allowed to fill for getting a new Kaveri connection, water connection? A program which teaches Kannada to our residents, basically, because it's always a matter of conflict. Like there's so much of viral things which goes on. So we said, why not use that as an opportunity? So last year, we started a program called Kannada Kalyona, where few volunteers from our own member apartment said, hey, we will put our hands up to teach conversational Kannada. It's become a huge success. We are in our second batch right now. Every time we put out a call for applications, within 48 hours, we get 2,000, 3,000 applications of people who want to learn the language. No, pets is a very, very contentious subject. One man's parking challenge is another man's snake emergency. In lift and lift issues, parking tends to be an issue. Sometimes RWS can be very draconian in terms of how they implement that. It's a problem with WhatsApp. Come to accept as the norm. So there is no good morning, good night, happy birthday, congratulations, nothing of that sort which happens. And if anything like that happens, very kindly people are told saying that, sir,
maybe like other guidelines, you should come up with a WhatsApp guideline for RWAs.
In the description of the WhatsApp group also, we put it saying that this is how it operates.
I think BAF can come up with guidelines for WhatsApp also.
That's a good idea to how to manage WhatsApp groups.
Welcome to the podcast, The Thing with This One Is. This is a podcast where we speak with creators, business owners, and thought leaders. We dive deep into details and nuances of human pursuits which are improving our lives. One such thought leader is Vikram Rai, who is the president of Bangalore Apartments Federation. Welcome to the podcast, Vikram.
Hello and namaskara, Ram. Thank you for having me on the episode.
It's really a pleasure, and thanks for taking the time for this. It's a very unique time to do this. Past few days has made us realize how fortunate we are to be living in Bengaluru, away from the border. Visuals from the border areas, we see them, and then we are very thankful to our defense forces, whose work is ensuring that we live in peace. It's a reality check for some of us who are living in our urban cocoons. It's the defense forces and the decision makers whose work is ensuring that we live in peace and we carry about our professional lives as normally as we can. And we can only be thankful for their efforts. While we talk about living and urban living specifically, it has transformed in India over the last couple of decades. We see high rises popping up in every Indian city. Some of us have migrated from smaller places to bigger cities, and there are privileges that come with that. But we should also not forget our duties and expectations that there are from us as residents and citizens of our country. It's not enough to just pay our taxes and maintenance fees. There's a lot more that we can do. Whether we live in apartments or individual houses, there is always sharing of resources. And with sharing of resources comes rules and regulations, flouting of which results in conflicts. Most places have residents' welfare associations or societies to take care of these conflicts. Uniquely in Bengaluru, we have an umbrella body which is on top of many of these RWAs, and that is the Bangalore Apartments Federation, led by Vikram. Today, we are going to speak with Vikram about BAF. How did it come about? What are the different things that it has already achieved? What are its current focus areas? And we'll also talk about issues that people face, and something that all of us have seen or read on WhatsApp primarily. While we talk about border areas, the WhatsApp groups of RWAs are a battlefield unto themselves. So we'll be looking at some of those specific things, and we'll dive into all of these issues because there are a lot of things that Vikram can tell us about how such issues can be dealt with at an RWA level and what BAF is doing to facilitate all of that. So Vikram, let's get into it. Let's talk about BAF first, and then obviously you're also an entrepreneur and how you have come into this. But how did BAF come about?
There's an interesting story to it. BAF is about a little over 10 years old now, maybe about 11 now. Back in 2013-14, one water services body, that is the BWSSB for Bangalore, decided to create a little bit of a flutter. They created a new tariff structure for apartment residents, and they called them bulk consumers, basically. So a bunch of people at that point of time felt that this was unfair, whereas domestic consumers in individual houses and the apartment residents are presumably the same. They're all domestic category. But why the disparity between residents of apartments versus individual residents? So they didn't feel right about it. So they came together and said this has to be protested. So they went to BWSSB, wrote a letter, representation, which didn't meet with any success or response, if I could say so. So then they decided that we need to fight it out in the court. So they filed a public interest litigation in the court.
Yeah.
Which unfortunately never came up even for hearing. I must say that. So they got a bit disappointed, frustrated, and they said that, hey, life moves on, let's go back. But in the midst of that, they did one good thing. They formed an organization. They registered an organization, let me put it that way, which was called Bangalore Apartments Federation, because they fundamentally felt that issues like this need the group of people to come together and take it up. The collective strength gives it more sort of credence and credibility to be able to fight it out with the government. But unfortunately, while the idea was powerful, it met a premature death at that point of time. But BAF officially got formed in 2013.
That's the origin story.
Absolutely. Got registered and it came into fruition by 2000.
And BWSSB is Bengaluru Water Supply and Sewage Board.
Sewage Board. Yes, that's correct.
Right. So it went into cold storage after 2013, I think.
That's correct.
And then...
That's correct. I think by 2014, since the case did not come up, it was maybe about 30, 40 people who came together during the version 1 of BAF. And since it didn't go anywhere, they said, we have our day-to-day lives. Most of them were professionals, working professionals, etc., who incidentally happened to be residents, but a little bit more sort of conscious citizens, if we could say. But they went back to their normal life. Cut to 2016, and our favorite party, BWSSB, again is a familiar culprit. This time they came up with a new rule which said that all apartments need to install a sewage treatment plant, irrespective of their age, when they were built, etc. So they made a blanket rule which says every apartment should install an STP. So they sort of made this a retrospective rule applicable to all apartments. That was the occasion when many people, many apartments residents said that, hey, this is not right. Simply because an installation of an STP is an expensive affair. You have to spend a bunch of lakhs of rupees to install it, and you then continue to spend a few lakhs of rupees every month to maintain it. It's expensive equipment.
So the issue was not with the concept of an STP or a sewage treatment plant, but because maybe residents assume that that's the work of the municipal corporation?
I think very largely the assumption at that point of time was that it is the role of the while not the municipal corporation, but the civic bodies which are subject to either a supply of water. So BWSSB's role and responsibility is what we put. And that's when people like me got involved in 2016. I was not a part of the original group which formed it. 2016 and 17, this issue hit our doorstep as well. We were levied penalties by BWSSB for not having an STP. So we said, hey, this is not right. So a bunch of us got involved and said, hey, we need to protest. We need to come together. Then somebody mentioned saying that, hey, while you want to come together, there's already a body which was set up in 2013,
which is the
called BAF, right? Why don't you guys meet those founders and figure out whether you can get together. Incidentally, it so happened that my own apartment was actually a founding member of the BAF. I didn't know about it, but we got involved. And the founding team members of BAF were actually very kind enough and to say that, yes, this is a battle, we want to come back again, let's get together, and very open and inclusive enough to create a wider spectrum of participation. And then under the banner of BAF, we fought the STP issue. And I think it was a very historic moment that on a particular date, which was on December 2nd of 2017, nearly 10,000 people from different apartments across the length and breadth of the country, length and breadth of the city, came out of their apartments and formed human chains in different parts of the city. So it was like it created a very strong visual mnemonic. Press got wind of it. They came out, they covered, and etc.
It's not very usual for people, I mean, like us, basically, right? Who will leave their comfort on a weekend or whatever and get out of their houses and form a human chain, for example.
In fact, after that human chain, when we went and met the BWSSB chairman, the exact statement that he used was, nowadays you guys are also out on the streets, right? which sort of, I think is very ironically poignant, because mass movements and street movements are always associated with possibly the downtrodden, rural folks, agrarian folks,
politically relevant,
etc. So you don't associate a middle and a upper middle class community to come together and publicly protest and take up activities like that. So it was probably for the first time that something like that had happened, and it bore its fruits as well. We got a meeting with the two ministers who were in charge of the Bangalore development at that point of time, and they immediately rescinded that order. They said that it will only be a prospective rule from future onwards. So any new apartments which get built of a certain size or more should then install an STP.
But that would also be easier for the civic bodies or the government, bodies to talk to people like you or other people like that as a group, rather than it being a disparate voices coming from everywhere. It's pretty interesting to see that everyone got together under one umbrella.
Yeah, I think the coming together under one umbrella was incidental, if I were to call it that way.
Sure.
But the future evolution was a little bit more structured, and I'm glad it happened that way. If you look at the first stage, as I call it, between 2013, 14 and 2016 as largely just a reaction of angry citizens to something which the government did. They came together, protested, sort of set up a human chain which caught the eye, media attention, and the government, you can technically call it the government bowed down to the demand of the public. Basically, the first success, right, if you could call it that way. But the second phase of it, as I would call, right, was more thought out. And then we realized that, hey, like you said, the collective demand and the collective pressure and the collective questioning is very powerful. So then BAF then made sense anyway, right? Correct. So then from there on, at that point of time, I mean, if you would call 2017 as a group of 50 RWAs, if you could call, then every year, then we actually came together, we set ourselves up in a proper manner in an organization. We had a governing council of a certain number of people who were the deciding group, etc. And then we focused on outreach and membership as well. So we then had a team of about 2 or 3 staff whom we recruited, came together, because we felt that, I think, to have a body which represents the interest of a large section of people which are apartment residents makes sense. And then we went to that stage 2, right? And then COVID happened.
Right.
And that, I think, changed the game for us, basically, right? Where the need for a BAF or a body, which then becomes a bridge for a lot of, incidentally, for government bodies also to come to us, to collaborate with us, to create a even messaging, to create some kind of bias for action, positive action. And they realize that, hey, these are all aggregations which are similar and homogeneous almost, and a communication to one association, it can then get spread to. They can make their work a lot more easier.
So that is when you started going to RWA saying they take our members. So do they have to pay a fee on an annual basis?
A little before that, we had started the membership outreach anyway. But what I mean is that it got momentum. Actually, a lot of associations also came to know about BAF during COVID. Because one interesting thing we used to send out what we call COVID advisories, which is essentially a very concise message, which used to summarize all the guidelines, whether this is allowed, not allowed. Because if you would remember, COVID was a time of great confusion, fake news, people didn't know what to do. So I think BAF's advisories provided a way for at least the residents of apartments to receive very validated, verified, consistent information. And they used to love that, right? They used to always, to the extent that I knew so many apartments used to refer, who were not even our members, saying that, BAF said this, so we are following the guidelines, which was, I think, good, because it created a kind of a momentum for all the associations, or at least a good majority of the associations in Bangalore, to come together. So we do have a small nominal membership fee. But it's quite nominal.
Everything requires certain amount of support from a monetary standpoint. Just run like a proper organization.
But I'm happy to say that I think a majority of our members, I think, are very convinced about the value that BAF brings to them.
I think a good example of that is the MOU that you guys have signed with the BWSSB, right?
Which is actually the part 3 of our evolution, after part 1 and part 2, right? It was the same BWSSB which had the differential tariff, which started an agitation.
It
was the same BWSSB with the STP rule, which brought a sort of a wave of citizens together. I mean, taking BA further. But interestingly, post-COVID, we also realized that I think it is not only an agitative mode or a conflicting mode that you should be taking. At least people like us, what do we want? We want a very peaceful, nice quality of life in a city like Bangalore, weather we enjoy, etc. Right? So we don't want. We are not activists, right? We are not taking up issues on thematic basis.
There is no political agenda.
There is no political agenda, right? So I think it is very easy for us to say that, hey, we do not have any streak of activism or political this thing. We only mean good quality of life. That's it. And to that extent, we also realize, I think it's very easy for us to say, hey, you, the government, we need to work with you, to support you, to collaborate with you. We can be your, what you call a confident collaborator whenever you want our support. But at the same time, we could also question you and challenge you when you don't do things right.
Yeah.
I think that's the sweet spot that we have now hit, right? Where we are not an NGO, we are not an activism group, we are just a citizen group which is meaning well for the city.
And it helps the government. Like, for example, I'd read about the thing that you had done about voter turnout.
Yeah.
You had done that. When was that? 2018?
We do that. We do that every election.
Right.
In 2018, when the last Karnataka Assembly elections happened, we ran a campaign called Every Vote Matters.
Yeah.
What we typically do in that campaign is we invite the representatives of all parties for an open debate. We call it the town hall, right?
Okay.
And we ask them questions on how they will work for the citizens, specifically of Bangalore, but in general for Karnataka as well. What would their vision be? Right? And it creates a very open atmosphere for a debate, a very professional debate. So 2018 was the first time. Then subsequently, every assembly election, every Lok Sabha election, we have replicated. In fact, last assembly elections, we also replicated it at a constituency level.
Wow.
At least in 4 constituencies, we were able to run local town halls where the candidates of that constituency were invited.
Wow.
And in one of our member apartment complex courtyards. And it makes for a nice
And
one.
they all showed up very normally. Everything was not like your 9 o'clock news, right?
It was not a 9 o'clock news. All of them were professional. In fact, strangely enough, permissions in multiple constituencies got denied to us.
Really?
Expecting that it will be a conflict, right? But I mean, they didn't know that, our town halls are usually well behaved, right? So, but we did conduct it in about 4 constituencies, which was very successful, went on really well.
Nice.
So it is a proof to say that, a new form of democratic engagement in the cities. Anyway, cities have a lot of people who have come from different, like you rightly said, people have moved in from different corners of the country. It's a new community, right? Expectations are different, expectations are new. So it's also an opportunity for the politicians, the representatives, to lay down a new vision for the cities.
So, I mean, the BAF sort of a thing is very wide in its scope because any and every issue is an issue about urban living. What kind of people does it take to sort of run BAF? I mean, like you, how did you get involved right at the beginning? How did other people get involved?
My particular involvement, like I said, was in 2016 and 17 during the BWSSP STP agitation. And there's a couple of years backstory to that. How I got involved with my apartment association committee itself is interesting. I had zero involvement in my apartment community.
Right.
Because for a good period of time, since I also used to live with my parents at that point of time, my father was the original, as you call, the uncle of the community, who actually, I mean, a lot of respect to people like him, by the way.
Correct.
Because I think they had a lot of focus on process, structure, framework, rules, because most of them came from yesteryears, 80s, 70s, middle class sort of professional bankers and things like that.
So I think that is important because, I think all bank offices, post offices and RWAs are running simply because of retirement.
Absolutely. Because they have at least invested that process framework in doing that.
Yes.
Same with our apartment complex, one of whom was my dad.
Yes.
And then in 2013, he migrated to our native place in Udupi. So it was out of sheer comparative shame. Every time I used to go out, people used to say that your father had done so many things, this thing, that thing, etc. But you're not involved at all, right? So I was like, okay, let's do something.
Right.
So then I got involved in the committee.
Yeah.
Once you joined the committee, I found the scope of the work fairly interesting, right?
Yes.
There are interesting problems to solve. There's scope to apply and I happen to be an entrepreneur. I run my own business, and we are all engineers, right? So that's a good combination: problem-solving approach, entrepreneurial approach, right? Both held in good stead when I was part of the committee. So we did a bunch of things interesting during the terms. I did about 3 terms in my committee, and at that point of time, it so happened that the STP issue came up.
Right.
It was just a natural pull towards that whole process that led me to joining BAF. And once in BAF, again, I met people who meant the same things, right? They were very, very interesting people who had the bigger vision than people like us to.
Yeah.
So how you could take this movement forward.
Right.
And they just pull. It so happens like how, like even back in college, right?
Yeah.
You just pull people and say that, hey, come together, join the journey.
Yeah.
That's about it, right? So then BAF's journey started.
So one interesting point you mentioned, I mean, you're not a retired uncle by any measure.
Yeah.
You have your own business. How does that help in running BAF? I mean, because it is a demand on your time, right?
Yeah, that's true. I think it takes a lot of my time, especially because now BAF is close to 1,350 members more than
Right.
that. And that I'm talking about 1,350 RWAs.
Right.
So between the 1,350 RWAs, they represent almost more than 300,000 households, right? So you're talking about not less than about 1 million, 1.5 million people
Wow.
living there,
Correct.
working there. So it's a huge ecosystem.
And
this
people dependent on them.
Dependent on them,
Yeah.
etc. So it's a large constituency that we serve. So it obviously it takes a bit of effort and time.
Yeah.
I would not deny that. But I think what we have done in the last 3-4 years is also, that's the stage 3 that we have now focused on, where having started as a response to issues and having understood the power of a collective federated movement, the next step we said, how do you be a responsible organization or a timeless organization and institution which is not dependent on maybe me or somebody else?
Yeah.
Focused a lot on that. So today, the 1,350 associations
Yeah.
are divided into something called as clusters, basically.
Okay.
So every cluster is a geographical cluster, maybe a radius of about 5-6 kilometers, usually has about 40-50 apartments in that. Some clusters tend to be very, very dense, like all the East Whitefield, Sarjapur
Yes.
Road, Bellandur,
Yeah.
HSR layout are the denser clusters, Bomanhalli, etc., because the growth of the city and apartments have happened outskirts. But each cluster has its own semi-administrative framework, if I could call it. There's a president and a secretary for every cluster.
Okay.
They are encouraged to meet regularly together, have cluster meetings, discuss issues which affect their area, because a problem of electronic city is very different from what a problem of Yelahanka is.
That is true.
And it is different from something else.
Yeah.
So they have very localized issues as well. So this decentralized cluster structure allows them to focus on their problems and find out solutions also. Now the interesting thing which has started happening is in our cluster meetings, and that is the influence and the power that is coming through. We now have government bodies, department like BBMP, BESCOM, BWSSP, who are joining our cluster meetings. So imagine a situation where the citizens, they have challenges, problems, and you have departments, people who can solve your problems. I mean, not completely, but at least can attempt to solve your problems, also being present in the same meeting.
Yeah.
So it's a very powerful construct, basically, right? So I think that's where we have now come. So coming back to the question about time, because this decentralized structure is there, so it's not just me.
Sure.
We have a governing council of 21 people, and there is an executive council which includes presidents and secretaries from each of these clusters. So it's a leadership group of almost about 80, 90, 100 people who are involved in the running of the organization on a day-to-day basis. And mind you, all of them doing voluntarily, right? So they're not paid to do this.
Correct.
So I think what we have been successful in this process is creating a pool of leadership, motivated leadership, right? Citizen leaders who can tomorrow, either in BAF or in their own RWAs or in their own areas, become bigger leaders.
I think their worldview expands significantly.
Absolutely. And this is something which I've always held in my own case. I say that, 2016-17, we were just normal entrepreneurs, etc. But now in 2020-25, the fact that we have been associated with a few of us who have been associated with BAF, right? It has given us the access, influence, network, because of the organization is very significant. And that's the pitch to any future leaders as well, right? Saying that, hey, you will find yourself in public life. It's tough. It's not easy, but at the same time, it's greatly enjoyable.
Sure.
That's it.
And this is possible because you're running your own startup, which, as you do in Bengaluru.
Absolutely. Right? So being an entrepreneur has helped a great deal. Like some of the sort of growth mindset, right?
Sure.
Which is very sort of popular amongst entrepreneurial circle, is something which we have tried to imbibe into a civic and community setting. For example, today, every year we go on to offsites, we do a boot camp, right? We take the leadership group to like a focused 2-day session, etc., saying what is the vision, what do you want to focus on, what your priority areas are, etc. So I think people like that also, when a little bit of a entrepreneurial corporate mindset comes into civic engagement, they feel nice and confident that a structure is getting built around what they are contributing, right? Because they value their time.
Right.
I think that time needs to be valued by the organization. You can't assume that they're all volunteers and then be very flippant about their. So you need to create a role, you need to create a structure, you need to create a process, right, around them. Not in a manner which is very limiting, but at the same time which is very enabling.
But I think it's only possible in Bengaluru, something of this sort, where people get together in a very civil manner, they discuss problems, they discuss solutions, then they go and actually work with the authorities to develop the solution. I don't think there is any other city in India which has a BAF kind of a setup. Or maybe people tried, but I haven't really seen...
I think as far as I know, I don't think so there is any entity as deep and wide as what we are today.
Or as functional on a regular basis.
As we are, and as evolved in its structure and approach as we are as well.
Right.
I think Bangalore has a very unique position of being what I call a modern city.
Okay.
When I say modern, most of its growth has happened in the last 3 decades. Actually, it's a very classical city. It has a long history. Prior to this 3 decades, it used to be called a pensioners' paradise, right? Retired uncles coming and settling down finally in Bangalore. But since the mid to late 80s, early to late 90s is when the IT sort of vibe has kicked in. So I moved into Bangalore in 1996. Guess what the population of Bangalore at that point of time was? And it's just about 9 years now from that time.
Much less than what it is right now, I suppose.
It was 49 lakhs, right? And today it is 1.5 crores.
Wow.
So Bangalore has grown in the last 3 decades, almost at the rate of 3%, 2 to 3% every year on year. So it's surely the fastest growing city. But I think because of that growth, the diversity of the people who have come in, and people have come in from all parts of the country, including from abroad. Everybody, like all of you who have moved in. I mean, technically, even I'm not a Bangalorean. I've come from somewhere else, basically, right?
But you're a Kannada.
But having said that, I think the true cosmopolitan nature of the city is its people, right?
Correct.
Diverse cultures, right? Diverse interests.
Yes.
Like today, you want to go cycling, you will find a tribe doing cycling. You want to do theater, you will find a tribe who will do that.
That's right.
You want to do vlogging, off-roading, everything you find a tribe over here, which is, I think, reflective of the diversity.
Right.
And because it's a modern city, I think, and problems are modern as well. So you would have seen in the recent few days, the creaking infrastructure, waterlogging everywhere, the rains creating havoc, etc. So it's not surely keeping up to the reputation of that cosmopolitan nature. Infrastructure is creaking mainly. But having said that, I think the diversity of Bangalore is its strength. To be able to look at a very modern approach towards problems, which is very inclusive, is Bangalore's strength. Correct. Which is why the way you're saying that, here people don't tend to break into arguments do happen, but broadly so, I think people are civil in terms of approaching, resolving. They're tech first, digital first approaches. Government also here, I think, has realized that it needs to be digital first, tech first. So there's a lot of tools, etc., which are available for citizen disputes, etc., and all that.
Yeah, I think the tech DNA of the city over the last couple of decades, so to speak, has developed, and that sort of thought process is coming into solving all such problems. Like BAF has a website, it has an app. Something that you don't really imagine.
We do have an app, which is very comprehensive. I would like to believe. So a lot of knowledge, wisdom, which generally somebody who is managing and running affairs of an apartment who needs. most of it is covered in our knowledge base, right? So today, if you have to install a rooftop solar plant, how do you do the waste management? What kind of application you allow to fill for getting a new Kaveri connection, water connection?
Oh yeah, that's a big one.
All those are covered today. We have a vendor database which is fully user generated, where if you today want a new security agency, you're not happy with your security agency, you can go to the BAF app and check for a new rated by someone else.
As long as you're an RWA which is a member of BAF.
That's true. I mean, to create some value for membership, we gate it a little bit towards login, etc. But information at the end of the day is available to people. But I think people understand the value of that membership tangibly with respect to the knowledge, wisdom, and sort of intellectual capacity that BAF is able to bring to various kinds of problems.
So let's talk about some of these focus areas that you have at the moment. And one thing that I wanted to congratulate you on was the whole work with HOPCOMs that you have done.
Yeah.
The horticultural bodies or the entities that bring agriculture produce to cities.
Yeah.
And they had a big challenge during COVID, and you guys helped them solve that problem by directly bringing apartment associations into it, right?
Yeah. That's true. I think while the evolution of that program happened during COVID, and it was very opportunistic, because at that point of time, the government came to us because they had a very unique situation. It was summer, one of the waves, I think the second wave, if I'm not mistaken, which was a very intense wave, happened to be just around or post summer, right?
Yeah.
May of 2020, if I'm not mistaken. They had a huge
2021, I think it was the second wave.
Yeah, second wave. So they had a huge harvest of fruits, which was ready, mangoes for exports, etc. And they were sitting on top of it. Suddenly exports had died down. Logistics had broken down, etc. So then they came to us. The horticulture department came to us saying that you need to help us. There are lots of farmers whose produce has a shelf life. It will spoil. Can you figure something out to get this sold? We said, yeah, let's figure something out. So we immediately put together a program which said that, hey, if you're able to bring those fruits to the doorstep, because people can't go out. If you get it to the doorstep of the apartments, then people will likely be benefited as well, right? And it will help the farmers. So that started that
and that's still going on? Do you still support
that? In fact,
that?
now we have come to the extent that we actually have an MOU with HOPCOMs for both seasonal fruit deliveries at the doorstep, as well as regular recurring vegetable sales at the doorstep. In fact, HOPCOMs, emboldened by that, has introduced, they need to be competitive as well, right? So we have been able to give them feedback with all this quick service delivery. So they have introduced now a WhatsApp-based ordering shopping mechanism based on the pull that is coming from the customers. So they are becoming, see what's happening, because you are engaging and there is the demand that you are able to create. You are also able to influence bodies like HOPCOMs, which is otherwise very traditional, classical in its approach, to modernize themselves. Right? So multiple programs and projects. So we have a program which teaches Kannada to our residents, basically, because it's always a matter of conflict. Like there's so much of viral things which goes on. So we said, why not use that as an opportunity? So last year we started a program called Kannada Kaliyona, where few volunteers from our own member apartment said, hey, we will put our hands up to teach conversational Kannada. It's become a huge success. We are in our second batch right now. Every time we put out a call for applications, within 48 hours, we get 2,000, 3,000 applications of people who want to learn the language.
And these are all new migrants, like young people who have just come to the city.
People who are in the city and say that, hey, I think learning the language of the place is a good thing. I want to do that, right? And this is simple conversational Kannada. I think about each batch is about 12 classes of an hour each, completely online. And at the end of the batches, they actually have a graduation ceremony. Where I have been to one graduation ceremony previously. They actually come on stage and sing the local state song, etc. And that takes tremendous. I think that program has transformed the way people perceive BAF as well. So we have a MOU with the traffic police. So today we consume the dynamic automatic alerts of traffic jams, etc. Directly on our app and our website. People get notified as the jams are happening. As you said, we have an MOU with BWSSB for sale of treated water. So I think we are now moving to a level, right, where we are saying that here the bunch of issues, problems, wherever there is government, wherever there is governance, And that's something that we have realized. Issues will never stop. There's nothing like a full stop to an issue. So we need to have a focus on constantly engaging with government bodies, because as years pass, the nature of issues become new, right? The nature of challenges become new. You need to be able to push push the boundary on changing policies, changing laws, etc. So that's an ongoing. So we have one team called Solutions Team, which is focused on water, waste, energy, municipal taxes and stuff like that. But we now have one more group called Programs Group, which is doing this HOPCOMs, Kannada, right? All kinds of engagements, which is bringing residents more and more together, right? Giving them a feeling of a community, that we are part of that apartment resident community, and this community is enabled for us by BAF, right? I think we are going in that direction.
So it kind of gives a legitimacy to it as well, right?
Absolutely. See, legitimacy also...
no, in the sense, legitimacy, let me put it this way. For example, if I am a new resident, or I got a new house or something, and I need to get Kaveri water connection. How do I go about it? I can come to BAF and look for advice on how do I get Kaveri water connection.
Correct. Absolutely. See, and legitimacy at two levels, right? One is when a resident welfare association comes together, a lot of times they are they don't know what constitutes the processes, frameworks, rules, right? How do I apply for a Kaveri new water connection, or what system do I put together? That's a community level issue. Of course, a lot of work that we have done actually directly feeds that community need. The second level is general residents, right? When you move from, say, Nagpur to Bangalore and you take a rental apartment, right? You also want to feel integrated into that community in ways that you may not be very worried about, hey, how is my waste taken care, or do I have a rooftop solar system? That there is a group of people, the committee will take care of it, hopefully. But you also want to get integrated into the community, right? Of your apartment, of your neighborhood, and of the city. I think that's the second layer which we are trying to build with all these programs that we are running now.
And it is complex, because there are things that we don't necessarily pay attention to. We only get aware of them when it's a problem, whether it's solid waste management, for example, or if you're in RWA, common area electricity charges, or GST on maintenance. All of these are things that you deal with?
Absolutely. Everything is part of the scope of coverage, because this is related to their day-to-day living in an apartment complex, basically. And like I said, those issues are multitude, but I think today we've been able to systematically create knowledge. See, knowledge at the end of the day is very crucial to provide to people, right? Because my belief is that a majority of the people they can probably discover knowledge, but if you give them ready-made, the impact of that knowledge is much solid.
Makes sense,
right? So I think that is our core focus, and along with that, we create a bias for action, right? For people to say that, hey, you have this knowledge, now how will you use it to create either a compliance adherence or something innovative? For example, water saving. Like BWSSB has now come to us. One part of the MOU is also how can you build more efficiency in terms of consumption. Most of the apartments, right, have a very high consumption quantum of water, for example, simply because they don't measure how much they consume. It's a common connection which comes to the building. So it tends to be very high. So we are working with BWSSB now to say, how can you bring that behavioral change to bring more efficiency at an individual household level, etc.
Water remains a big problem.
Big problem, because as we saw in the last, at least last year, we had a very acute summer
shortage.
Lots of, and apartments were at the forefront. They had a tough situation in terms of a lot of apartments depend on groundwater, tanker water, etc. So how do you create a water positive city? I mean, going forward, those challenges will only grow.
And interesting that you talk about information. And one thing that a lot of RWAs face is the attrition of their own staff. And that those are the people who are at the forefront when it comes to compliance for fire, lifts, and what have you. That staff person, especially the manager, everyone complains about the manager is not doing this, that, whatever. And they remember him only when it's kind of a thankless job. So are you guys doing anything for those people so that becomes also a career option?
No, absolutely. I think that layer of staff, right? And it includes the manager, it includes the plumber, it includes the electrician, gardener, people who really keep you up and going, basically, right? I mean, I call them invisible essentials, those people
Yes,
basically, right? This is a
absolutely.
term that I really liked during COVID because domestic helpers, etc.,
Yes.
right? They're so invisible, they're around your life, but they're so essential to your life,
Absolutely.
basically. So since the last 3-4 years, we have said that, hey, we have to do something with that cadre. The other challenge is the availability of them is very unstructured, right? Like today, if you have to recruit an estate manager for an apartment, there is no single focused recruitment agency through which you can recruit an estate manager.
Correct.
Anyway, I think that still remains a problem. But what we said is, how can we work with the staff who most of the time tends to be frontline people in any kind of an issue or a distress, or it's part of their job profile.
So are there any training programs?
We do run a bunch of training programs.
Right.
For example, we run a fire safety and life safety training program for estate managers, which happens almost once every quarter. We have now trained close to about 250 estate managers in the past year and a half in both the fire safety and life safety. Life safety, where they're taught how to give CPR and all that kind of stuff. Then we have a training program for plumbers, which is a day-long training program where we assume that these are all existing plumbers of apartments who have not gone through any formal training. They've just they've just trained on the job, right?
Correct.
How can you then polish
learn from a father?
Absolutely, right? How can you then fine-tune their knowledge to be able to become a lot of times detection of leakages, pipelines, etc., and all that kind of stuff. So that is one more program that we run. We are also evaluating a program for electricians, for example. And recently we also introduced a training program for committee members. Now, at the end of the day, committee members are also important people who can influence, and it requires a lot of skills to be able to run. And you know this, right? Any RWA is not an easy thing to manage. So it requires some unique skills for them to be able to do that job. So we recognize that. So we now have an MOU with the Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore, where we have kickstarted a program called Apartment Governance Essentials, AGE for short. The first batch of which just concluded very recently. About 23 participants did a 4-day weekend program on campus and went through a very intense process, had a project presentation, etc. We believe that is also a very important program where you can actually integrate skills for actually potential committee members of RWAs.
And you get a certification at the end?
They do get a certification, which is jointly certified by BAF and the Real Estate Research Institute at the IIM Bangalore. So that's a very significant step as well.
Brilliant. I think there are a lot of other things also that you do with regards to other aspects like lifts, renewal. There are so many compliance issues that
I think compliances, you will be amazed how many compliances apartments have to go through. It's a very long list. If you have an STP, you need to periodically, possibly once in 5 years, apply for something called a CFO, right? If you
what does CFO stand for?
It's consent for operation. So it has to be certified that it operates properly. If you have a lift, elevator running in your building, you have to get a lift license periodically. Your entire electrical installation of the building needs to be inspected by a body called Electrical Inspectorate, who have to come and certify that your diesel generators, your water pumps, everything is working fine, basically, right? Your building needs to be certified by the Fire and Emergency Services Department. Every 2 years, you need to get something called a clearance certificate, where the department has to come inspect your building and say that you are fire safe, basically, right? So many such compliances. These are just the top compliances that I'm talking about, basically. If you are an apartment of 100 units or more, you need to have your own organic waste converter installed in your campus and premises, basically, right? So multiple such compliances are there. So we make it fairly simple for any committee, because our assumption is that somebody who joins the committee, and they are not going to be in the committee forever, it's usually a year or 2 years, etc., come with a blank slate. They don't know what to do. So we make it easy for them to just sort of plug into our knowledge base and find out what compliances they have to do.
So all these resources are available on your website?
All available on the website as well as the app. So we have made it multimodal for them to access these things. In addition to that, actually, we run a lot of knowledge sessions. There is a series that we run called Parihara, which is a Kannada word for solution. So anything related to water, energy, waste, application, new Kaveri connection,
Yeah.
how to efficiently use your water,
Nice.
if rooftop solar system, how to install it,
Yeah.
what's the comparator technologies. We keep running sessions.
Literally every aspect of urban living is
Well
covered.
Yeah,
Nice.
absolutely. And these are video sessions, YouTube. We invite experts to come and share
Nice.
their, because there are a lot of experts. So we are, at the end of the day, we cannot be the experts in everything. So we involve experts, other collaborators, other organizations,
Sure.
government bodies to come and share their knowledge as well.
Are you also doing things in sustainability, climate related stuff?
I think climate is becoming a very important, and that is very relevant in today's times, right? See, even 4 or 5 years back, people would have said that what is climate change? They would have said polar ice caps melting or something like that. It's not really relating to me.
Correct.
But I think in the last few years, the climate events have become more starker, dangerous, and very close to you. If there is a Bangalore which is flooding today because of a sudden cloudburst or a heavy rain, that is a climate event. That's an extreme climate event. If there is the temperature which is going to 35, 36, 37 degrees Celsius in the summer, which was never heard of in Bangalore, that's an extreme climate event. So climate is a very important part of our strategy. Building behavioral change amongst our members and residents to recognize that climate change is real and what can we do as a community to protect ourselves from climate change, be resource efficient, etc., is an important part of the agenda.
That's where you have the bamboos.
Yeah. So we started in 2000. By the way, we started this initiative in 2018 itself.
Okay.
Bamboos, I mean, it's an acronym.
Bamboos is Bengaluru Apartments making Bengaluru operationally outstanding and sustainable.
It's a mouthful, isn't it? Yeah.
Bamboos.
So
you know, किसी को bamboo करना अलग मतलब होता है उसका.
Correct. I know that. Of course I know that, basically. So which is why we have the new name for bamboos is called Hasiru, right? Okay. Hasiru is a single, it means green in Kannada, right? It means that greening, right? Yes. Taking a green strategy is probably a simpler terminology that we have.
Yeah.
So today, all our efforts in terms of sustainability, which is on water, on waste, on energy, on mobility. Mobility is also an important part.
Right.
Are wrapped around this macro program called Hasiru, where we do a bunch of things. We run a Hasiru apartment contest, where every year the apartments who are members or non-members as well can apply for a Hasiru award. So their sustainability quotient is very high.
Very nice.
They get awarded in an annual ceremony. Then we run something called as a retrofit workshop, which is very focused group of about 60, 70 people coming together, taking one topic each and trying to sort of hack and problem solve on that topic. So it could be on water, on energy, etc. Then there's a lot of other content that we disseminate also. So climate change and sustainability is a huge part of our agenda. I think it's part of a very, very strong emotional agenda as well, I think, because a bunch of us believe that it's an important problem to tackle.
No, absolutely. This is phenomenal. Yeah, this is a lot of things I didn't know before, and I'm sure a lot of people will get to know more about BAF and the kind of things. I think if you're watching this from Bengaluru and you're part of an RWA, do become part of the Hasiru thing. I think it's pretty cool. I think as conscientious citizens, we should definitely back this initiative big time. And if you're not in Bengaluru, and if you're in Mumbai, Delhi, Kolkata, Chennai, wherever, think of an organization like BAF. I think it will benefit other cities big time. You know, like I was living in Gurugram earlier, and Kisan Mandis are there. They could benefit from something like what you did with
Absolutely.
HOPCOMs.
And we're very happy to talk to people who would want to set up something like that.
Brilliant.
Right? We translate this knowledge and the know-how.
Yeah.
But yes, I think if a bunch of people come together, nothing like it.
Nice. Oh, brilliant. Now let's look at some of the issues that people deal with. And, you know, before while I was preparing for this conversation with you, I just asked people in general from different cities about what the issues they were facing. And I asked them for screenshot from their RWA groups.
Okay.
Because this is going to be so much fun.
So you sought proof.
Yes. And, you know, RWA groups are the most action-oriented groups, at least on WhatsApp.
Absolutely. I'm a part of 30 cluster WhatsApp groups, so you can imagine the kind of fun that I'm party to.
Correct. So some of the things that we look at, and what I'll do now is I'll also read through some of the WhatsApps that we had, and we'll talk about some issues. I've got responses from Gurugram, from Delhi, from Hyderabad, from Chennai, from Mumbai, and also from Bengaluru. Okay. and I've tried to categorize them because these issues are very common. Let's start with pets. Okay, now let's read some of these things. Okay, and this is going to be hilarious. I'm going to read the first one. Requests to members when posting about dog poop cleanup. Is it possible to skip posting the photo so people don't pick up the poop of their dogs? And that's one. Then the responder will check the CCTV footage for and you need to know your dog. 1 second, just let me get this closer a bit. Yeah. You need to keep your dog well under control. It jumped on me and scratched my thing. So why take your dog around if you don't have any control on them? I think this is a valid concern with dogs. I mean, obviously I picked some hilarious ones, but dogs is definitely a big thing. What have you guys done regarding pets?
No, pets is a very, very contentious subject, not just in all cities, I would imagine.
Yes. This is all India. This is no longer just Bengaluru.
And when you talk about pets, pets is just a generic term. So there are pet
Strays
owners,
also.
pet parents.
Oh yes, pet parents, right.
Right. And then there are animal lovers who also care for strays.
Correct.
Whose new name is community animals, by the way. Okay. So, and then there are other people who are, I mean, they have a middle of the road approach towards animals. They're okay with the animals, but then there are live and let live. But there are other people who are very scared of animals, right? All of these people stay in an apartment complex. They use common facilities. They go up and down in the lifts, etc. Poop happens, piss happens, etc. So how do you deal with this? Basically, not an easy job to do.
Yeah.
As far as BAF is concerned, I mean, and this is where our sort of collaboration and relationship with the government comes to play. In a normal scenario, you would have expected the municipal body to put out a bunch of sort of guidelines and just sort of not have consulted anybody. When the BBMP put together the pet guidelines and the community animal guidelines, as they call it, we were in that room discussing actively and giving our feedback and suggestions.
Right.
And credit to them, because they started out by putting together that guidelines, which largely referred to, these are the AWBI guidelines, these are the Supreme Court rulings in this matter, etc., etc. So we had to tell them, saying that if you were to just put the rule and law on paper, it will create chaos.
Yeah.
Let's take a very stakeholder approach, empathetic approach, understand what each other's challenges and concerns are, and try to address that in a middle path manner. So then we said, hey, pet parents today feel that, if the RWAs put a certain degree of restrictions, which because they stay, but stray animal lovers don't have that limitations because they can just shower the law. So we said all of these stakeholders, we need to create some kind of a ownership, responsibility towards each other, right? And that's when, and last year the BBMP came up with the pet guidelines, which I must say that was
guidelines, not regulations.
With regulations referred to.
Okay.
So the municipal body can put together guidelines on top of what the regulations are also.
Right.
Regulations are by AWA, which is the Animal Welfare Board of India. Rulings are by courts, various courts, etc. So they refer to all that. But the language is much more nicer. So it has 3 sections today.
Yeah.
One section which talks about what the RWA has to do. One section which talks about what the pet parents have to do. One section which talks about the stray and community animal lovers and feeders have to do.
Yeah.
So all of them have responsibilities, all of them have obligations, and all of them have rights.
Has it helped?
Absolutely. I think the feedback that we have got with people after having consumed these guidelines has been very, very positive. I think everybody then feels that, hey, my interests have been protected.
Sure.
But I also have a responsibility towards that person who's absolutely scared of animals, or somebody else who's a feeder, etc. So I think it has achieved a good balance.
So before you complain next time on the WhatsApp group about anybody's pet, go on BAF website, read the regulations or the guidelines, and then you can refer to that and say, by the way, you are contravening this aspect.
That's one of our favorite white papers or guidelines which get access to.
I'm sure. Yeah. There are other animals also keep visiting. Snakes is a big example because we have invaded their habitat, I think.
That's true. Yeah.
Snake catchers are a common concern also. Yeah. And then there was a funny one that I saw. Somebody said that there is an emergency situation with a vehicle parked. And then the response was, if their concern is treated as an emergency, then a snake entering our house should be treated as one too. Then there was a WhatsApp I got.
One man's parking challenge is another man's snake emergency.
Then there was one I saw, this was from Gurugram, another place where I lived many years ago. There was a Neil guy they saw.
Wow. Yeah.
So the comment was that we live in natural surroundings and we do not need to go to corporate.
Yeah, I mean, in Bangalore, outskirts of Bangalore, especially around Bannerghatta National Park, you always hear of instances when leopards have encroached into apartment complexes, etc. Like you rightly said, I think we have invaded their territory.
Right.
I think we'll have to realize that.
Okay, second big issue is lifts. This one I need to read properly. Hi, just a quick question. If kids pressing lift buttons on all floors is a big issue, why is people getting on from the ground floor onto the elevator that is going down to the basement not an issue? When people enter a lift which is going down, although they have to go up. Now, this causes a problem because people are waiting in the basement and the parking, and the lift that comes is already crowded. That's a big issue that is there. I'll read the other one also, and then you can respond if there is anything that can be done. This is something a friend of mine told me. This happened in a society where I own an apartment. Now, this is also very common. Two factions. RWAs are factions, right? One is in power, then they
Tell me about it.
somebody else comes in. Right. So, two factions are always at loggerheads, current RWA and erstwhile RWA. One day, a member of the ex-RWA team got stuck in a lift for 6 to 8 minutes. He created so much ruckus by not coming out of the lift once it was opened. So, he stayed in the lift. He didn't come out.
For how many hours?
I know. And he got a chair and his food delivered from home.
Wow.
He kept on shouting for attention like a small kid. It got so over the top. As once you had taken a stance, how could you back down? Right? Ego per aa gayi thi, basically. Now what they did was, funnily, then he came to the next faction came to power. Now they made him in charge of lifts.
Wow.
Ab sab log uske upar chad rahe hain.
So the suggestion also has the solution, basically, right? So no, what I mean, lift and lift issues aside.
So one more thing that I've not put here, but it's a very common thing, is usage of lifts by workers. There is always this, and I don't know why people are not allowing helpers or workers to take normal lifts. There are service lifts. You should not take this lift. You should go in the other lift.
Yeah,
doesn't make any sense to me. But there are certain rules or regulations that each RWA comes up with. Or how is that?
Doesn't make sense to me as well. But that's a personal opinion, right?
Right.
See, my feeling on that, or my opinion on that, is that, see, we live in a city where multiple cultures are coming and coexisting together.
No, but this is not just the Bengaluru phenomenon, right? This is across
Of course,
India.
that's what I'm saying, right? In cities,
cities
typically have people coming from different states, different cultures, different backgrounds. It's a potpourri of cultures, basically, right? Cultures also transcends ages, demographics, etc. So how do you and I mean, we must all admit that sort of class divide and class bias is a very strong. It's been going on for ages now together.
Yeah.
Can you wipe that out overnight? I don't think so.
Yeah.
Is there an opportunity for us to slowly create a mechanism incrementally to change that mindset? Definitely yes. For example, one of the things that we are now working in BAF is to create something like a fair workplace handbook. Now, you in an apartment complex, you have not just the staff of the association, which is your security, plumber, etc., housekeeping staff who come and work over there.
Yeah.
You also have domestic helpers, cooks, nannies, etc., who come. So the number of people any average household today depends on. The statistic is that you need to have at least 1.5 support staff for an average household, right? And that's true with all of us, basically, right? The invisible essentials, as I call it. Now, they come from different stratas of society. They're all possibly people who are living in our neighborhoods, in the different gullies of our neighborhoods, etc. But they come and help us, right? Lead a day-to-day life. How are we changing our mindset towards now? Our houses, our communities is their workplace.
Correct.
While in a company setup that you work, right, it has very stringent rules on what a workplace is, what conditions, right, harassment, what constitutes they have a posh and all that kind of stuff. But do our own household workplaces have something like that? Is because they're largely considered as unorganized workforce, basically, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things we are saying that how can you create the notion of a workplace for domestic place of work? Can you bring a little bit more dignity to their thing? See, one of the programs which we have started in that category is a health and insurance program for staff both the association
nice.
staff and domestic staff working. We have a collaboration with an interesting company called Clinic, who's creating a primary health and insurance package for domestic helpers. So that gives them coverage for shocks from any fever or anything that happens at a primary level, and it creates an insurance cover for them to access hospitalization when it is required. That is what is most needed for them. So we are trying to create a sense of conscious responsibility of apartment residents to the people who work with them as well. But can you eliminate these issues of disparity class wise overnight? That answer is no. I think it's a very hard one to break, but we should all do our efforts incrementally to change that.
I think that entitled behavior will take some time to go. I think as soon as somebody buys an apartment, they're like, मैंने apartment खरीदा है, बस हो गया.
Absolutely,
you know? I had that situation with me once in the sense that I had just moved into a new apartment block and I was waiting for the lift. This guy next to me, and we happened to press the same floor. I said, "Oh, you just moved in, yeah. So did you buy or did you rent?" I said, "I'm renting." The guy never spoke a word.
Yeah. So there was a very popular complex in Bangalore. I won't name which it is, which is a combination of both apartments and villas.
Right.
During COVID, I got a call from the Special Commissioner Health for BBMP saying there's a situation in one of the complexes. Presumably they have very high and mighty over there. They're putting a lot of pressure on me on how to put the containment zone during COVID, right? And he said, I want you guys to be present to negotiate, right? And this was a classic class divide between villa guys and apartment guys saying, hey, no, just put the containment zone to the apartment. We are not part of that.
Wow.
So biases and class bias divides exist at all levels, right? So
I know which one you're talking about. That's where K2 lives, right? I think the next big issue
I'm not naming that.
Okay. That's okay. Next one is parking. It's a big one. And I'm just going to read one which was very interesting. And this happened very recently when there was the whole training regarding blackouts and evacuation drills were to be done. And people were discussing all of that. And then this person pops in and says that India Pakistan to hote rahega, pehle apni gaadi dhang se park karo. You know? So parking is a big issue. There's like car parking. Please leave our villa parking area. You can park it anywhere. Then somebody else has complained that, look, I just came and I had to park very urgently because something had happened to her mother and they were just not allowing her to park.
Yeah.
You know, and then she said that I was told that become a member of RWA and then you can park here and things like that. So that's another big thing, that parking is a big issue.
Parking tends to be an issue. Sometimes RWAs can be very draconian in terms of how they implement that. Sometimes residents and people can be very callous and careless about how they also utilize that. Which is why I think when you started this episode, you said that when we move into a city, I mean, we should be grateful to the armed forces for keeping us safe.
Yes.
But at the same time, I think there's our own self sort of assumed and taken up responsibility towards an urban living that we should also be conscious of. This comes under that, right?
Yeah.
See, to be mindful of what is my space, what is my allocated space, and how I stick to that is part of it.
See, like this is a very easy solution. Like somebody messages, some continuous tick, 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 tick sound is coming from a scooter which is parked near my apartment. I think something like that.
Yeah.
Can somebody look at it? And then obviously the person is like, oh yes, this is my scooter. I'm sorry, I was trying to repair it, but it did not get repaired. Something like that he responds. And then he says that, why don't you just park it near the gate inside? He's like, sure, I'll do it. Simple solution, right?
A lot of times, I think these communication tools also help. Like in my apartment, for example, people are very mindful of informing the others that, hey, you know what, the next 3 hours or so, I have an AC installation or something like that.
Yeah.
Some drilling sound will come, but please I'm very mindful of that. Hopefully not more than 3 hours. So I think that courtesy is...
That is also there. We have one more issue. This is with workers. So somebody saying that there is continuous work happening. The regulations are that 1 to 4 you're not supposed to work, but you're still doing it. It's very common, right?
And with our homes now also becoming workplaces after COVID, hybrid work culture, etc. Now our own homes are also workplaces, right? So we'll have to be... So the nature of the problems keep changing, right? See, what was hitherto considered as a complete residential area, you would have probably only appealed saying, hey, either senior citizens or students studying, etc. for the noise. But now there are also people working and taking calls. So that also becomes a disturbance. So I don't have an easy answer for that, but yes, those are issues to be tackled.
Yeah, there was this comment about tree cutting and the workers not having done their job properly. This one was very funny, and this is classic WhatsApp uncle thing. They talk about workers not being required anymore because so much automation and AI is there. And then some uncle starts saying that in the future women will have it much easier. Then it suddenly triggered the feminists in the WhatsApp group.
That's always there. Need to be very.
I'm not making fun of the issue, but the way WhatsApp communication happens.
Yeah.
Another one is trash clearance. This came to us from, I think, Hyderabad. Somebody is throwing leftover bread and roti from their kitchen balcony, which is creating a rat menace. Wiring of a washing machine was totally cut by these rats, who stored these eatables inside the machine, and it went beyond repair. I had to purchase a new machine, which resulted in loss of 10,000 rupees to me. Please give eatables to someone in need or make proper use of dustbin. And then that person mentioned the apartment numbers, like from this floor to this floor. One guy said, nothing has been thrown from this balcony. So that is another one. And then people complain, nobody's coming to my house to clear garbage. So this is a very genuine concern that this person has. My house is this and this place. Nobody has come to collect garbage. I'm really fed up, which means fed up, I think. If anyone can come and help, thanks in advance. The immediate response is, any suggestion for cricket academies?
Yeah, totally orthogonal topic.
I'm not familiar with anything close by, but here are the ones that I know exist in our city.
Yeah, I think
this adds to the problem. If somebody has genuinely put a question, they don't get a response, and then totally different topic starts.
That's a problem with WhatsApp, right?
Correct.
Right? Somebody's put, and we have the same problem in our cluster groups as well. But having said that, going back to the waste topic,
yes,
I think one of the things that Bangalore has done well, and we have played a role in that as well, because a good majority of the Bangalore stays in apartments. I think there is near 100% segregation, at least, which is being followed.
Dry and wet waste.
Dry, wet, and hazardous waste. I think that, and there are so many other NGOs and organizations who have played a role in pushing the agenda on segregation as a very, very important requirement. I think that we should be proud of. Right? Now, how does that segregated waste eventually go, whether it gets mixed up or not?
But at least you do your part of segregating it. And I think household help also needs to be trained for that.
Absolutely. Right? And a lot of apartments do this training courses for household helps repeatedly. Like in my apartment, there is a poster stuck in the kitchen over there, which is very visually easy for somebody to follow.
Not that difficult to segregate waste.
Simple. Absolutely. Right. So I think that we have done a good job.
This one is my favorite. This came up recently, I think kind of went viral. This is a news in Times of India recently in Bengaluru. Resident pays a fine of over 15,000 for keeping his shoe rack outside. This is quite funny in a way. But apparently, when you read through, it's like this guy actually paid in advance. Is that keep it? I'm going to still not move my shoe rack. It's going to remain outside.
That's true. I saw this as well because it came up in Times of India here.
This is no right or wrong here. I don't know what's the problem with keeping shoes outside.
No, I think there is a wrong because the fundamental motivation for saying that you don't keep a shoe rack outside or don't clog the common spaces because it comes from the basis of the fire and emergency services department having a requirement that your access paths should be clear.
Should be blocked.
For example, Beyond Carlton, which is an organization that we collaborate with for the fire safety program
they also advise something like this.
So Beyond Carlton actually has an interesting history. It was formed after a tragedy in a building here, not very far from where we are shooting this. Carlton Towers on Old Airport Road, way back in 2013, if I'm not mistaken, where I think about 7 inmates. It was a commercial complex, died due to a fire on that day. Unfortunately. The large cause of the reason was that their access path and escape paths were blocked. The doors were latched. It was riveted. Something was stopped over there, etc. Now that created the challenge. So why I think it's important to keep your access paths, your emergency exits, etc. clear is because of this reason. Of course, this is
I think the genesis of it is understood. Is it all right for RWA to come up with any rule of this nature and start putting fines and things like that? Is it normal?
I think if I were to take a step back today, a lot of lack of clarity on aspects like this, on governance of apartments itself, is because there is no clear law which gives you a framework on how to govern, basically, right? That's the problem of the law, right? The last law that we have, which exists in Karnataka, was implemented in 1972. It's called the Karnataka Apartment Ownership Act. now 72 is when I was not even born, right? You were not even born.
Yeah,
That's when they had imagined a
Pretty
law
old.
for management of apartments. Today we are in 2025.
Mm.
So there is a need to modernize, look at a much newer legal framework,
Mm.
which is, I think that's an area where BAF is working on strongly.
Mm.
There is a new law which the government has drafted, we believe, and we have played a very strong role in giving inputs to that. We believe that it is very soon coming forth. It needs a cabinet approval. It needs a legislative assent. Governor has to approve. It's a new law, the usual rigmarole. But I think we are quite close to it.
I think the important thing is citizen participation through BAF, which is brilliant.
And I think feedback and public consultation, importantly, contributing to any act of any process of lawmaking. So we hope that this new law will come. I think July there will be a session of the assembly. I think once that law comes, at least I have some reasonable awareness of what that law might look like. I think a lot of these issues will have solutioning, which are gaps, basically, right? Functional gaps will get sorted out.
Once that comes on, it
because it gives both the resident and the committee, the association, reasonable rights and responsibilities and ownership to tackle this issue.
Okay, cool. Let's take a couple more issues quickly. This is about people doing business on WhatsApp, RWA WhatsApp groups. Like this one came from Gurugram. Some lady, I don't know if the lady or not, put a picture of chicken malai, kasuri chicken malai. I'm making this tonight. If interested, let me know. I'll add your portion as well. But confirm in an hour's time so that I marinate the chicken accordingly. Now, the concern is not that she's offering food, but somebody pointed out that maybe she's not making it fresh. She just left over from previous. I don't know if it's she or he. Sorry about that.
But usually the conflict is about whether you can run businesses from the residential units, basically.
Yeah, let's read another one, which is someone needs to bell the cat, and I have decided to take the lead. One of our own, I think this is a situation which was very morose. Somebody had lost a family member, and while that condolence messages were going on, somebody was pushing their business messages. Saying that, very insensitive, that accept your message of selling something. There was an e-commerce, whatever, lemons or whatever it was. The layout group is for info sharing that helps the layout. And I think it's high time you stop spamming the group with your lemon, mango, and other sales. Once in a blue moon, it's okay. It makes sense, right? If somebody has a business, they put it. But if somebody's putting it regularly, then it's a problem.
It's also a matter of some bit of hygiene on how the ground rules of communication are set as well, right? In something like a WhatsApp group. Like, for example, in our own cluster groups, which are about 30 of them, there are fairly reasonable ground rules which people today have come to accept as the norm. So there is no good morning, good night, happy birthday, congratulations, nothing of that sort which happens. And if anything like that happens, very kindly people are told saying that, sir, this is a no spam on that kind of this thing.
I think maybe like other guidelines, you should come up with a WhatsApp guideline for RWAs.
In the description of the WhatsApp group also, we put it saying that this is how it operates.
I think BAF can come up with guidelines for WhatsApp also.
That's a good idea to how to manage WhatsApp groups.
The next one is also funny, and I'm sure you also have done it when you were a kid. So kids are a nuisance for some people. And this one is for yesterday and today as well. Some kid rang the bell and ran away. So two things that have come up. One is kids doing this. They go to houses or apartments, ring the bell, run away. Or they go into the lift and press all the buttons. That's an issue that people have pointed out. And then obviously...
I had a funny retort for them saying that put the Havel shock like us. No, jokes aside. See, there are two very divergent opinions on this. One is today's cities, the places to play for kids is reducing.
Exactly.
I think we need to recognize that when you and me were kids, I think we had grounds and streets and we could go and play anywhere without disturbing neighbors, right? But that place is shrinking more and more. They are forced to play in common areas, stairs, etc. and all that kind of stuff. But people do get disturbed, basically, right? So I think to the extent possible, if communities can identify play areas, right, within the limited scope of their buildings itself, and have a conversation with the kids, saying that, hey, this is your space, you own this space.
I have a better suggestion to people: play with the kids. Just go out and play with them.
Much better, absolutely.
Get out of WhatsApp.
Correct,
and play with the kids.
That's true.
Okay, I think let's just take one more. This one is regarding fire hazard. This happened in some building in Hyderabad. I think there was a fire accident that happened. it got contained. But the thing they found out was there are so many cigarettes in the balcony where the fire accident. So somebody was throwing cigarette butts and wooden plates or something, corrugated boxes, they caught fire. So now that is what they said that, this is something that you should take care of. I think people throwing, I think you talked about fire safety and compliance around that. I think a very simple thing, don't throw a lit cigarette out of your
In
apartment.
fact, in many complexes, the debate is whether smoking itself should be allowed within what is the scope of private space versus public space. For example, our balconies, private, etc. I think some of the complexes have actually created exclusive smoking areas also for people to go. It's again not a simple, but like you said, I think the simplest act of responsibility could be not to at least throw the stubs out. Right. And be conscious of that.
Sense. It's very simple. I think if people just develop a little bit more, we become just a little more sensitive to other people's needs. I think fundamentally what we lack, sometimes I feel this very strongly, is that we just don't care for what I do and how it is going to make life difficult for somebody else.
Absolutely.
Whether when I'm standing in a queue and trying to cut it, whether I'm throwing cigarette butts or whether I'm throwing my trash out, just keep in mind that it might create problem for somebody else.
I think courtesy in life is not a very understood word at all. I always feel that you should start from a position of courtesy, right? Like you rightly said, how does anything that I do affect someone else? Does that affect someone else negatively? Does that affect somebody else positively? Right? In some sense, the work that we do in BAF, we truly believe that it affects somebody else positively. Are you able to amplify that more and more? You feel a great sense of high.
Correct.
Something that affects somebody negatively, can you briefly think about it and say that, it's affordable loss for me not to do that.
Correct.
Let me absorb my ego and not do that. Even if it means that position of other person is not reasonable. I think that will go a long way. At least city living, you need a lot more mutual courtesy.
I've not covered a lot of issues that people have sent to me, by the way, and we probably need to do another podcast just to take on those things. But one thing that we should end on is, how does BAF help RWAs handle their issues? Like, for example, I got a big one, and this one is from Mumbai actually, where the chairman of the RWA was not around, and my brother-in-law sent this to me. I just could not summarize it properly without hiding names and all that. Chairman was not there. The AGM happened. And so there was a huge fight that happened on WhatsApp and otherwise, people accusing each other of fraud, or they're saying that you're not there. Why are you not there? You don't think this is as important. Then that led to the chairman resigning. So the next AGM, the first agenda point is, what do we do now that the chairman has resigned? So does BAF help? I mean, one thing is about that certification or the training that you do for RWA people. Is this something very regular that you see intra-RWA issues coming to BAF?
Oh, very regularly, right? A lot of times, right? Conflicts, disputes, right? And it's not just an RWA level conflict which comes. There are a lot of times conflicts between owners, residents, different groups, cultural groups, during sale, builders and associations when takeover happens. So all kinds of conflicts fall into the scope of disputes, basically. So there are two levels at which we are working on, and what we can potentially doing forward. A lot of work in this area is maybe for the future as well. One is, a lot of times when such issues come, a mere sharing of knowledge itself solves that. Second is, actually, we now have a collaboration with a couple of agencies which actually focus specifically on dispute resolution. Actually, their area of focus is dispute resolution in the corporate space. They do that arbitration and mediation very commonly in a corporate private setting. They came to us and saying that we think that this is an area where we can also share our expertise. Because residential communities are filled with disputes, basically, right? So we said, hey, great idea. So we now have collaborations with them where they not only talk about arbitration and mediation as a tool, as a lower cost, because a lot of times when a dispute happens, the natural instinct is to file a police case or go to the court, which you and me know
nobody should want that.
Is a very time consuming and a very expensive affair. So in comparison, mediation and arbitration is something that we are actively promoting as a tool for dispute resolution. The next level is, I think we believe that BAF will have a role to play to be engaged in the dispute or mediation a little bit more actively. Now, that could be a low touch advisory consulting kind of a layer, which might potentially, we're still debating whether we should be doing that or not.
Sure.
But I think every dispute and every sort of issue is different.
Well, you could have that. Like, for example, parking and all this stuff is something that we should have. But something like when an apartment has to come for redevelopment and you need everyone's consent, and how does an RWA handle that? That is probably
That's a subject matter expertise depth also. So we are evaluating that thought process also as to in the future, should BAF play a slightly more consultative role for unique issues, strategic issues like this, which requires depth and knowledge. That might be the next step. But as of now, both the combination of existing knowledge as well as partnerships with people who specifically provide dispute resolution through mediation and arbitration are options for people to
Nice. That is really good. I think one thing I should mention, we got this one special message from Chennai from our guest on the second episode, Praveen Kumar, comedian. Kuka.
Yes.
And he sent a message to me. He didn't have a screenshot, but he sent...
definitely should have an element of
I'm sure there is a lot of material for stand-up comedians on WhatsApp groups. So he told about how the RWA thought of giving employment to a person who can do ironing of clothes and give that person space in the basement. And then somebody raised this thing on that, saying that what if the coal from that iron flies out and there are cars and it might burn a car down, it will create a blast and 5 floors of the... So simple question from a fire safety thing, is it okay to allow ironing people in the basement of apartments?
So first of all, I think this could make for a very interesting movie script, right?
Yes.
Iron, coal, fire, explosion, building coming down, right?
Correct.
So no, from a fire safety, I think first of all, this is absolutely dramatic imagination of what could happen, I think. So I think most of the apartments tend to have one of the service providers is, I mean, it's very essential service, right? In a building. So they do have iron service providers working this thing. I think they can be helped. I know one of our own batchmates who works on a program actually to help Krishnan Ranganathan as part of Udyam Foundation to migrate ironwalas from coal-based iron boxes to gas-based, LPG gas-based. So I think doing something like that has an act of kindness on that Ironman, right? Where his health is better protected because if he's using inhaling fumes, he migrates to something else, and at the same time his efficiency is also increased using a lime base. So I think funny enough, but I don't think so. It is a fire hazard as defined by the fire department at least.
Or if you think it's a fire hazard, just give him an electric iron.
Yeah, absolutely.
There is a common area electricity thing that BAF has done. Go to BAF's website, you can see common area electricity thing, because you're asking for EV charging ports, right? In the basement. Same thing. You can do it for your poor istri wala.
Absolutely. Act of kindness, right? Act of support.
Iron,
Yeah, that's true.
Very
Absolutely.
simple solution, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
But these are just, I think, symbols of discontent that people have against each other. And they're so, voluminous in nature, but it's all restricted to WhatsApp. I mean, you are living next to each other, your kids are going to same school probably and what have you. I think a lot of it is primarily ego-driven.
And I think a lack of contact and engagement fueling that ego.
Correct.
See, when you live in the digital world, WhatsApp world, I strongly believe that it becomes easier for you to be very bold and abusive and aggressive in the digital world. But for the same issue, if you have to pick up the phone and if you have to, in front of that person, confront that person, it goes maybe 3 notches down.
Right.
Hence, it is very important to have that face touch, face connect with people.
Yeah. So if you can't tell something like whatever you can't tell to a person to their face, don't put it on WhatsApp as well.
Absolutely.
Simple as
Right?
that.
And in BF, we have a golden rule for fake news. When in doubt, don't share. That's simple, right? So that's always we put it saying that if you have even 1% iota of doubt whether this news or this information or this video or this image is not true, don't share.
Oh, brilliant. I think that's a great message to end the podcast on. Thank you so much, Vikram, for sparing the time today. learned a lot and got a lot of information for sure. And I'm sure everybody who watched this or heard this, everyone can watch this on YouTube, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. So thank you so much, Vikram, for doing this.
No, it's been a pleasure. I think I didn't know how much time we spent speaking about various issues. Was great fun. Was able to share the BAF story, but at the same time, the last section on going through WhatsApp shares was fun and great as well.
Yeah, I think it's fun because we're looking at it that way. We chose some cherry picked, but otherwise it's a very serious.
But it will always be conflict zones, right?
Yes, absolutely.
We will never maybe put a full stop on saying that,
Yes.
lived very happily ever after will never happen. Yeah, people will continue to fight, but I think always a better tomorrow possibly.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot. Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for more. Thank you.